this focuses on taking all the macronutrients in the right amount. So the focus is on fiber-rich foods, protein, as well as moderating the amount of carbs. So half your plate should be vegetables, all your non-starchy vegetables. 1/4 of your plate should be your cereal, millet, and starch group, and 1/4 of your plate should be your protein sources. If our individuals with type 1 diabetes pay attention to the food plate and follow the food plate at each meal, we can ensure that we can get protein in each meal, and this will help to give better satiety as well as blunt the post-glycemic blood glucose response. Now, what are the vegetarian sources of protein? So all your milk and milk products like curd, buttermilk, cheese, paneer, soybean, soy milk, and tofu, dals and pulses, nuts give you a small quantity of protein, as well as if you look at most of our traditional recipes, they're cereal and pulse based. So whether it's an idli, whether it's a dosa, whether it's khichdi, whether it's dal rice, all of them have a cereal pulse combination, and therefore they become a good quality protein, because by itself cereal or a pulse is not the best quality protein. But when you combine them, then what is missing in cereals, because they lack the amino acid lysine, whereas pulses lack the amino acid methionine. So therefore, when you combine them, they form a complete amino acid profile, and therefore they are known as complete proteins. Now we're looking at protein quality. Now protein quality, there are two things that we see. One is your PDCA scores as well as your DIAS score. Now, PDCAs is something that we commonly use to judge the protein quality. And let's understand what is the protein digestibility corrected amino acid score, which is known as the PDCA score. It is a method of evaluating the quality of protein based on the amino acid requirement of humans and the ability to digest protein. It compares the amount of essential amino acids in the food to a scoring pattern based on the essential amino acid requirements of a 2 to a 5-year-old child to determine its most limiting amino acids. The highest PDCA value that any protein can achieve is 1, indicating that the protein will provide 100% of all amino acid requirements in the diet. And now if you look at most of the foods, I've enlisted most of the vegetarian foods. If you look, milk, whey, casein, are all having a PDCA score of 1, which is making it a complete protein, whereas soybean is close to it, peas, oats, all of them have a lower PDCA score compared to your milk and milk products. Now, ways to add protein to the diet, you can add it in different recipes, such as if you're using paneer, you can make cutlets or sandwiches, wraps, vegetables, tikkis, and so on, with different kinds of protein-rich sources. You can use them in your traditional diets to improve the protein quality and the quantity of your meal. Now, ways to add protein in a vegetarian diet, the recipes of traditional Indian foods can be modified to increase the protein content. And this can be done without affecting the palatability and without making major changes in the patient's eating preferences, because here we're talking about children, and they have a lot of likes and dislikes. And therefore, it's very important that when we add protein sources to the food, we should not change the palatability of the food. In fact, make the food look more appealing and more tasty. And like we mentioned earlier, cereal pulse combination or addition of dairy products and nuts will further enhance the protein content of the meal to help meet the recommendations. Now, here are some examples that I've listed out. So if you look at it, very simple traditional home cooked meals, whether you're in any part of India, whether it's north, south, east, west, if you look at the traditional meals, there is a lot of emphasis to, bring about a good quality protein. So most of them are cereal pulse combinations, and therefore we encourage our parents and children to stick to traditional home cooked recipes, which are easy to make, which are economical, as well as tasty. Now, here is a case of a 9-year-old boy, upper middle class, food habits. He's a vegetarian. If you look at his height, he's 133 centimeters. He's 21 kgs. Ideal body weight is 25 kgs as per the ICMR 2020 guidelines. He's recently diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. His HbA1c is 12%, which shows that he's uncontrolled. He's newly diagnosed, and that's why his HbA1c is 12%. Family history of type 2 diabetes in grandfather. If you look at his CGMS, it's all over the place. Growth chart, again, he is underweight. The BMI is less than 3rd percentile, and therefore it is showing that he is underweight. Weight is also on the lower side, and therefore the focus has to be on improving the weight by enhancing the nutrient quality of the meal. Now, if you look at his dietary recall, It's a very, very simple diet that he's consuming, but there's rusk and there's a lot of high carb, high GI foods that he's been eating. Most of his meals are low in protein. If you look at the protein content of the meal, it's only 8.3% of protein coming from this meal. Energy is just 1250 calories. Carbohydrate intake is 2,205 grams, which is 65%. So the carbohydrate content is high, whereas the protein content is low. And poor awareness and education on carb counting, uncontrolled blood glucose levels, irregular blood glucose monitoring, because the parents are very scared about what to give the child. They were not really informed, and therefore they restricted the food to only certain foods because they were not sure about which foods are going to increase their blood glucose levels. Goals to improve glycemic control, educate on carb counting, ensure adequate growth and development, and meet nutritional needs while considering patients' preferences. Intervention: on meeting him, we counseled him and his family about eating balanced meal. They were educated on carbohydrate counting, and he was also advised to start with some physical activity. Now, carbohydrate counting, we all know, we educated them on, we calculated the total daily dose and derived the insulin to carb ratio, as well as the insulin sensitivity factor. Now, the macronutrient calculations as per the ESPAT guidelines, like we mentioned earlier, the carbohydrate, we kept it to around 50%. Protein, we kept it to around 15% coming from protein, of energy coming from protein, and remaining from fat. And therefore, he was consuming around 1250 calories. So we gradually increased it to around 1400 calories. His requirement is 1700 calories according to the ICMR 2020 for a 9-year-old boy. However, we step it up gradually. So giving him 1400 kilocalories, protein 52.5 grams, which is 15% of calories coming from protein, 50% coming from carbs, and 35% coming from fat. And this is the distribution. Now, this is the meal plan. So for breakfast, we gave him either a moong dal dosa or a chilla, besan chilla, mixed dal chilla, fruits with unsalted nuts. So one portion of fruit with unsalted nuts and seeds as a mid-morning snack. A lunch was, again, we tried to enhance the amount of protein in the diet. So curd, paneer was added, a dal, or a palak dal, dalia khichdi with curry and vegetable, or a rajma rice, masoor pulao with curd raita. So we gave them a lot of options, but each option had protein-rich sources which were included in the meals. Evening snack was also, worked on to improve the protein content of the meal. So a paneer wrap or a soya or tofu wrap or chana kurmura peanut chaat. So the protein coming in from chana and peanuts. Makhana paneer veggie chaat, or a chickpea tikki or a rajma tikki, so that we could get some variety as well as make the food look very appealing, as well as improve the blood glucose control. Low or no carbohydrate options were advised if he was hungry in between, and dinner was kept same as lunch because we've given him a lot of options and we educated the parents on carbohydrate counting. The child was extremely happy to be able to have so many options. We asked the mother not to give rusk or biscuits or any high carb snacks in between. Instead, focus on home cooked meals, natural foods, and make the food appealing to the child. Now, these are the low or no carbohydrate protein-rich foods. So with its paneer, curd, buttermilk, cheese, nuts, tofu, soya chunks, soya bean were incorporated in the diet. And we told them in what portions to consume it so that it will not increase his blood glucose levels. And he was extremely happy to see the kind of options that he could have. If you look at his HbA1c, it came down from 12% to 8.5% in 3 months. And he was extremely happy. The parents were educated on carbohydrate counting, and he was also regular with his physical activity. This also helped him improve his insulin sensitivity and reduced his insulin dosage. And therefore, his total daily dose went down from 33 units to 27 units in a month. Now, if you look at his weight also increased. So there was a 0.8 kg weight gain noticed in 2 months. And the parents are again very happy that the child was looking healthy and was very active. He was very high on energy and he was enjoying the foods that he was consuming. So in conclusion, a qualified dietitian plays an essential role in ensuring adequate protein intake, especially in vegetarian patients. Indian vegetarian meals with little effort and focus can help meet the protein requirements of children with type 1 diabetes. helping achieve optimum growth and good glycemic control. So thank you so much for your patient hearing. It was wonderful speaking to you all. All that I've spoken is in my book, Diet and Diabetes Simplified, which is available on Amazon, Kindle, and Flipkart.
Thank you, Salis, for that wonderful informative talk, which is very, very essential for type 1 diabetes nutritional aspect, especially the protein intake, which is neglected in India. So let us move further with different topics.
The second lecture would be delivered by Dr. Soumitra Pathare on psychosocial aspects and mental health in type 1 diabetes. We are fortunate to have you, sir, and welcome to IDS. Dr. Soumitra Pathare is a consultant psychiatrist and director of Center for Mental Health Law and Policy at ILS. He has contributed to the WHO Mental Health Policy Service Guidance Package. He has worked as consultant in various countries like Seychelles, Indonesia. He has helped draft India's new mental health law and was member of the policy group appointed by Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India, to draft a new national mental health policy for India. Over to you, sir. Thank you so much.
Soumitra Pathare. I'm a psychiatrist and I'm based at the Center for Mental Health Law and Policy at the Indian Law Society in Pune. So I thought I'd start my talk telling you a little bit about the center where I work. We work to promote the rights of people with mental health problems or psychosocial disabilities using a rights-based approach. And basically my team, which is comprised of about 60 people, works across various verticals. So we work on law and policy reform, we work on suicide prevention, we also work on community mental health, community-based mental health interventions, health system strengthening, peer support, and youth mental health. So that's the whole range of various activities that we do. And this is just a little bit about myself. I'm a consultant psychiatrist and also the director at the center. And these are some of my interests, especially in mental health policy and scaling up mental health services. And I have worked with the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India, in drafting India's new Mental Health Care Act. I also was a member of the group which drafted India's National Mental Health Policy, which was released in 2014. And I worked internationally in across various countries as a WHO consultant. So that's literally a little bit about myself so that you have some idea of who the speaker is and what am I talking about. I was going to talk about psychosocial issues in young people with type 1 diabetes. As you probably know very well, that managing diabetes, especially in young people in adolescents, is a major challenge. And having diabetes at that age also causes many restrictions for young people. And especially when you're at that age, when you're trying to experiment with things, you're trying to do things differently. And there's generally an attitude of challenging established norms because you want to try and develop your own personality. That managing diabetes at that point becomes a huge challenge. Now, there is a lot of evidence from across the world which shows that young people, adolescents with diabetes have very high rates of mental health problems. And this includes things like depression and anxiety. And what these high rates of mental health problems do is a couple of things. One is it obviously impairs their functioning. So it means that they are likely to not be functioning as well as they should be functioning. So that's one thing that it does. The other thing that depression at that age in somebody with diabetes does is the fact that uh, diabetes is not so well controlled. So it impacts their diabetes control. So you have two different effects. You have the effect on their psychological health, which then has an effect on the diabetes. And then you also have the effect of the psychological health problems having an effect on their functioning, which means school performance, academic performance, and all of those issues. And this sets up a vicious cycle, so that you have a situation where your diabetes control is poor. That causes more functional difficulties. The functional difficulties then cause more psychological problems, and then the psychological problems cause even poorer diabetes control. And it's that kind of a vicious loop that young people then get caught into. So that's really one of the biggest challenges. And in many countries across the world, you will find that diabetes, especially among young people, when they're managing diabetes, they will have a very clear, they have a very clear situation where the diabetes team will have a psychologist on the team. The psychologist will provide psychological care. The psychologist might provide counseling to the family. Now, this is something that becomes part of the diabetes care for young people. In high income countries, especially in Europe and North America, this is very common. This is something that happens with regularity, and it's part of the process. The real challenge is in countries like India and other countries which are low resourced, low resources to provide these kind of psychological services to young people. For example, in India, we have a huge shortage of mental health professionals, so that even adults with mental health problems primarily do not get the kind of psychological and mental health support that they require or need. Uh, in those circumstances, the availability of psychologists who are trained, or psychological service providers who are trained in being able to work with young people, especially young people with diabetes, is an even bigger challenge. One of the ways that we've tried to deal with this challenge in adult populations is to try and use what are called as lay health workers. So there's a lot of trials from across the country in India as well as in other countries, which show that using lay health workers would be anybody who, say, has a 10th or 12th grade education, or maybe even a graduate education, who are not necessarily trained in health, but some graduate education, who then receive specific training how to provide psychological support to people with mental problems. And what has happened is that the trials have shown that this is very effective. That you can help a lot of people, especially in places where no other resources are available. You can help people deal with their mental health problems, especially mild to moderate depression or anxiety, which is very common, the common mental disorders. We run a large program, for example, in the district of Mehsana in Gujarat, which is spread across close to 600 villages, where we train volunteers from within these villages to provide basic psychosocial support, so they can provide counseling to anyone who has mild to moderate depression or anxiety kind of symptoms and disorders. And we've got evidence to show that this is very, and then when that doesn't work, then they are able to make referrals to the formal mental health services. So you end up getting a good step care kind of an approach to providing care in situations of low resources. Unfortunately, something like that does not exist for young people with diabetes. And if something like that could be set up, then I think that would be a good way of trying to address the mental health needs of young people with type 1 diabetes. Because in the foreseeable future, even in our large cities, having psychological care which can be provided to young people with type 1 diabetes is not going to happen so easily. I'm not taking the example of individual counselors or individual psychologists. There will always be the odd individual psychologist who is available to some people. I'm trying to speak from a perspective of public health, which means if you had to provide psychological care for all adolescents with type 1 diabetes in the city of Pune, the city where I live in, for example, then do we have the resources to be able to provide that? And resources are obviously both human resources as well as financial resources. And that is where we have a problem, that we run short of both human as well as financial resources. And so training lay health workers and having them supervised by a mental health professional like a psychologist might just be a way of addressing both the challenges, the challenge of human resources as well as the challenge of financial resources. And that might be a way of addressing this need in a place even like Pune or Mumbai or Delhi, big cities. And why is it important to address that? Because I told you about the short-term effects of it. You know, the short-term effects being that diabetes control might be poor, their functioning might be affected, and also the emotional distress. But there's a lot of evidence which shows that in the long run, depression in adolescents or depression in that age has long-term negative consequences, especially if it is left untreated. And so addressing these mental health problems, especially these common mental health problems like depression and anxiety, is extremely important to prevent long-term better outcomes, both in terms of their mental health as well as in terms of their physical health. And I'm hoping that we are able to do these kind of trials, that we are able to test whether this method will work. I mean, I'm suggesting this as a potential method based on the fact that it works for adults with mental health problems. Will this work for young people with juvenile diabetes? We don't know the answer because there haven't been any such trials. We don't know that it will work, but prima facie it should work. It basically require modification from what it is done with adults. You might want to build in some kind of service which also provides counseling for the parents, for example, because that is very essential. So if you do all of that, then I think there is a potential to address this particular need at a public health level. And I would only like to leave you with this last bit, which is to say that it is possible, even in low resource settings, to address mental health needs. It is possible, even in low resource needs, to address the mental health needs of young people. And it should therefore be possible to address mental health needs of young people with type 1 diabetes. And that's something that we really need more research on. We need funders to take an interest in it. We need mental health professionals to take an interest in it. We need diabetes clinicians to take an interest in it. Diabetes clinicians need to understand that providing psychological support is not only good in itself, but also it might actually make their life easier by improving diabetes control. I'm going to stop here. Thank you so much for asking me and giving me this opportunity to speak, and wishing you all a fruitful summit and going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Soumitra Pathare, sir, for giving us a very good overview and your thoughts about improving the situation for the patients with type 1 diabetes, and especially the psychosocial and mental health aspects, and how professionals from different fields can come together for this cause is what your take-home message is. And we'll certainly give it a thought and try to take this ahead, how we can all come together and join hands to improve the lives of the patients. So thank you once again, and we'll move on to the next topic. The next speaker, the topic is tips for a successful type 1 diabetes management. And we have Nupur Lalwani over here, who is also one of the key persons involved in organizing this particular symposium. She is the founder director of the Blue Circle Diabetes Foundation, which is a non-profit organization and support group for people with diabetes, especially type 1 diabetes in India. She herself has type 1 diabetes, and she has shown how a type 1 diabetes person can lead a very active life, a very fruitful life, and be an example for others. She's also a certified diabetes educator and an insulin pump trainer. And of course, last but not the least, she runs marathons and ultra marathons. So she demonstrates by leading a personal example of how to lead a successful life living with type 1 diabetes. Over to you, Nupur.
Good morning, and it's nice to be here today virtually amidst all of you. My name is Nupur Lalwani. I am a person living with type 1 diabetes. I've lived with type 1 diabetes for the past 25 years, and I'm also a certified diabetes educator and a certified insulin pump trainer. And I run an organization called the Blue Circle Diabetes Foundation, which is a non-profit organization and a support group for people living with all types of diabetes across India. I'm very grateful to Dr. Unikrishnan and the team at Chelaram Hospital for inviting me and for having Blue Circle be a part of this wonderful medical conference. I also want to congratulate, Dr. Unikrishnan and the whole team for really, involving patient voices and giving a platform to people living with diabetes to come and share their thoughts. And I really, really look forward to a wonderful symposium that we have today of the CDI and Blue Circle Symposium on type 1 diabetes. So I'm going to quickly get started, and my topic for today, over the next 15 minutes, I'm going to talk about tips for a successful type 1 diabetes management. Now, I'm not sure if, if I can qualify to give a lot of tips, but I can definitely share my experience of 25 years of living with type 1 diabetes and the learnings I've had along the way. And I'm very, very excited to be sharing this with all of you that are watching, whether you are a person living with diabetes or a caregiver or a medical professional. All right, I'm just going to move to the next slide. So now what we're looking at on the screen is the Kubler-Ross model of the 5 stages of grief. To be honest, however you put it, whichever way you sugarcoat it or you don't, the diagnosis of type 1 diabetes is very, very hard. There is no nicer way of putting this. It's not easy. I was a child of 8 years old when I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And I think each one of us, as people living with diabetes or caregivers, or even our doctors and our medical professionals, will be able to identify that each of us go through these 5 stages of grief. So, looking at the first stage, which is denial, what? It's just not possible. How could I have type 1 diabetes? Or how could my child have diabetes? Why me? Why my baby? Why, my spouse or my parent or whoever is the person living with diabetes? I think that is very, very normal. It is very natural. And I think that one should give oneself enough time to, go through the whole process, to go through the whole continuum of these feelings and to acknowledge them and respect them. Because it's not, you don't reach the level of acceptance in a day or a month. I mean, the process of grieving and the process of coming to terms with the diagnosis of type 1 diabetes is not linear. It's not the same for all of us. Well, for one person, it might take a month or two. For another, it might take 5 years. There is no right or wrong approach to this. I think we all go through these phases, but the faster we realize that we're not alone, I think the better things work out for all of us. The second stage, moving on from denial, is anger. You feel frustrated. You feel like, I don't know why I have to go through this. I am just, I'm just angry. Why can't I eat the things I like eating? Why can't I, why can't I be spontaneous? Why can't I have a fun, enjoyable time with my friends or my family? And the constant feeling of anxiety, I think that is also something that bogs us down. I can't step out of the door without my, it's okay if I forget my home keys, but if I step outside the door without glucose, I know I could be in trouble. In fact, as we sit here today and, we talk about diabetes and we talk about, how people are living with it and dealing with it. As we speak, I'd like to show you, I'm sitting here with my, glucose tablets. So this is the, no, I wouldn't say this is anxiety. I would say this is preparation. I know I have a presentation to make, and I just want to be prepared, and I want to, give it my best. So I'm ready with my glucose. In case I have a low, I can pop a pill. But I think when you're newly diagnosed, it's really, really, it's extremely overwhelming, and it's not easy. You have to give yourself time, and you have to be kind to yourself and to the person that's living with diabetes. Coming on to the third stage of grief is bargaining, a feeling of helplessness. And I think this is more common with parents, because parents are natural caregivers for their children. And for most children diagnosed with diabetes, including, in my case, my parents, my family, my sister was a very young child. She was an infant when I was diagnosed. My parents had this feeling of helplessness as well. What did we do that our child got diabetes, and why couldn't we save her, and why couldn't we, why can't I take away the diagnosis, why can't I have it instead of her? I think these are feelings that most caregivers, especially parents, go through, and it's a process. I mean, I think the healing is just a whole process, and one has to go through it. Of course, you would also feel very, very angry and hostile towards people who tell you that, okay, from tomorrow onwards, you need to take 5 injections a day, and well, that's your life. That's the rest of your life. It's not easy. The fact of the matter is that a diagnosis is life changing. It's absolutely not easy, and there's a lot of learning to do. And I think we all need to also remember that there are a lot of quacks and a lot of people that are not medical professionals that will jump in and then want to sort of to tell you that, hey, listen, maybe if you eat fruits, your diabetes will get cured. You all know who I'm talking about. And if you notice the YouTube channel of Blue Circle Diabetes Foundation, you'll also see a very fun skit that we did about how all of these babas and these quacks don't really, it's very dangerous to follow them, in short. Moving on to depression, and then finally acceptance. I think we all go through low phases in life, and it's got nothing to do with just your diagnosis. Life itself is hard, but I think the very fact that as human beings we are resilient, we are tough, and I definitely want to tell you that it makes a huge difference to have a strong community by your side, and to have encouraging doctors and medical professionals as well. And well, acceptance is the final happy phase, and that's also not the end. You have to keep working on it, and every day is a struggle. It's beautiful at the end of it. So I think the most important thing here is that knowledge is power. Knowing things really puts you in a position of making an informed decision, and of being able to take a call whether I should take insulin right now or I should take glucose. What is a hypo, what is a hyper, what is carb counting, what is insulin, why do I have to inject it, what happens if I don't inject it? I think when you're newly diagnosed, as it is, it's really, really overwhelming. There are so many things happening. I think what would help, and what our experience has been running a community, is that if you touch upon the few basic things,
like, okay, listen, you can't go too low. If your sugar goes below 70, that's called a hypoglycemia, and that can be dangerous. You also can't go too high, because then that's a hyperglycemia, and then you need to take insulin to correct it. So both of these are extremes that you need to avoid. If things like these are broken down easily and explained, and understood and accepted by the family, the caregivers, and the person living with diabetes, it makes life a lot easier. Even 25 years down the line, I am learning something new every day. There is no end to learning. There is no need, I think, to feel like, I've reached a point where I know it all. That is not true. I know nothing. That's a better approach to have. And for people who are newly diagnosed and watching this, remember, you cannot stop insulin. You must believe your doctor. You must trust medical science, because type 1 diabetes is a condition where your body does not make insulin or makes very little. So insulin is life. You also must understand what carb counting is, and slowly and steadily you will get a grip on your sugars, and you will learn how to stay in range, not go too high and not go too low, and just float around in the middle. And that's the beauty of well managed type 1 diabetes. To bring a little smile on your face and a little positivity, I also want to tell you that nothing is impossible for people living with diabetes. The photograph that is on your screen right now, there are 5 people on this in this photograph, and all 5 of them live with type 1 diabetes. The 4 people in the neon green t-shirts, including me right there with the blue patch on my arm, the 4 of us walked 100 kilometers at the Oxfam Trail Walker in Karjat, which is in Maharashtra. And turns out we made history. We were the first team living with type 1 diabetes to walk 100 kilometers. I mean, even to this day, people tell me that you guys are crazy. We wouldn't even drive 100 kilometers, and you all walked it. So we covered this distance in 48 hours, and we use technology to help us. So the screenshot that you see on your screen, at the bottom of the screenshot is a map where our caregivers and our followers on social media could track us and see how far we walked. So at this point, we would have walked 30 kilometers, which you can see on the top. You can also see our blood sugars just above the map. So, an interesting thing happened. One of the team members had a hypo, and people started calling us and messaging us and WhatsApping us and asking, is he all right? Is he fine? Have you guys helped him? Has he treated his hypo? So, all that love and affection that we received from the people who were cheering us on and who were supporting us throughout this journey, not just those 48 hours when we walked 100 kilometers, but even before that, our families, our friends, our doctors, our educators, everybody. I mean, this is an ode to every person living with type 1 diabetes, and every related person who's related to them. You can do anything you set your mind to. You can walk 100 kilometers, you can go to the moon, you can become the prime minister. We all know people living with type 1 diabetes can do amazing things. There are people that have done all of these and much more. You will have a normal life, you will have a great life. The onus of taking care of your health is on you. And that brings me to the tools that can be used for managing type 1 diabetes. And this is my favorite selection of limited things that I have felt are very, very important. I think the first and the most important thing is that you must know your diabetes basics. You cannot take the first step without knowing what you're into. If you don't know what a hypo is and how to treat it, you can't independently manage your day. So you must know your basics, and that is something that you must know really, really well and practice every single day. Second is, you also must have an open mind and explore technology, because I think these days we are living in the age of smartphones and mobile apps and CGMs and pumps, and I think it's great that these options exist. Also, on the other hand, we see a lot of families that cannot afford these things. In fact, for the largest chunk of population in India, affording an expensive piece of technology on a repetitive basis is simply not possible. I think it's very important to realize that, you know, we must not feel defeated or low, because it's really not about having the most expensive thing, because that doesn't guarantee you excellent blood sugar control. What guarantees you good blood sugar control is going back to point one, that is knowing your basics. So it's very, very important to know basics. Have an open mind, and feel free to explore technology as well. Look at different ways of eating. There are very many approaches to managing sugars. What's worked for me particularly is having a way of eating that's low carb. I follow Dr. Bernstein, and my HbA1cs run in the fives. There are different ways of reaching the same goal, and you have to find what works for you. You have to talk to your doctor, and you have to make an informed decision. But it's very important to know what options are in front of you. Of course, exercise is an important tool, and I think not just for people with type 1 diabetes, for everyone today. We all live a very sedentary life, and it's not easy, living this life without a little bit of exercise. And I think for kids, they're lucky, because playing and running around is a great form of exercise. It's for us adults that we need to have a schedule, and we need to clock in some time for exercise. But again, do what you love, and you'll never have a boring day exercise wise. Then always trust scientific evidence. There will always be people who tell you, are you having karele ka juice, and methi is going to solve your diabetes. And well, I think whether you want to respond to them or not is entirely up to you. But you must be confident that what you're doing is right. You must be sure that what you're doing is scientific, and you're following proper guidance. And then everything else can be fine-tuned and made better. I think it's also very important. One of the most important things in my journey living with type 1 diabetes over 25 years has been finding a community, building a community, paying it forward, because there is no greater joy than giving back to the same community that you have learned from and that you have got support and help from. It's essential that we all share our best practices. There's a lot I've learned from, the diabetes online community at large. And, I wish to pay it forward by sharing my experiences with people who live with the same condition as me. And lastly, never be afraid to ask questions. It is absolutely okay to ask why. I think the question why has saved my life on several occasions. So I would encourage you to always be curious enough to ask questions. There is never a silly question. There is never a wrong question. The fact that you're asking indicates that you want to learn. Please feel confident and free enough, to try things and ask, and then make an informed decision. A lot has been said and done about, type 1 diabetes and how to manage it, and carb counting and this and that. But I think sometimes we forget that, taking care of our mental health is equally important. I wouldn't be able to sit here today in this chair and talk to all of you if I wasn't in a comfortable space mentally. If I was having to hide my diabetes, or if I was just not happy, with life, that would reflect on my diabetes management as well. And I think for all of us who've lived with type 1 diabetes for long periods of time, we've all gone through phases. I've gone through a phase of diabetes burnout. When I was going through it, I didn't know it. There was a term. I didn't know it was called diabetes burnout. But these things are real. These things are going to happen. And I think if you are informed what they are and how to handle them, you'll sail through. There'll be no problem at all. One must recognize that a diagnosis is a big deal. It's a life-changing moment. Everything changes about your life the day after you're diagnosed. It's very important to have some self-compassion and have some self-love, because being too hard on yourself is really, you're going to crack. This is, like the analogy I most enjoy is that type 1 diabetes is not a sprint. It's not your Usain Bolt 100-meter sprint. It's a marathon. It's much more than that. We are all in this for the long haul. There are going to be good days, there are going to be bad days, but it's very, very important to take a step back at times, to take a break, to take a little mental holiday. A lot of people have told me, and I've felt this as well, there's a constant pressure to perform. You're in the spotlight. Are you eating right? Are your HbA1cs right? Is your weight going up? Is your weight going down? Are your, creatinine levels high or low? There's a lot of pressure. There are a lot of things that we have to keep in check to make sure that we have a healthy life. And it's important to acknowledge that, and it's important to talk about that. And it's absolutely okay to not be okay sometimes. It's okay to feel down and out. And that's why, we started this thing called the Buddy Project Helpline, which is basically India's first app-based helpline. As you can see, the photographs of the people on the screen, these are our volunteers. They live with diabetes. So some of them live with type 1, some live with type 2, some are caregivers. Basically, every type of person that understands, that lives day in and day out with someone with diabetes is a volunteer on this helpline. And I think it's absolutely okay to ask for help. We are extremely grateful to Dr. Unikrishnan for training us. Dr. Unikrishnan personally trained all our 12 buddies, and we had tremendous support from Chelaram Hospital on training our volunteers on the basics of diabetes management. And also, Dr. Soumitra Pathare and his team at the Center for Mental Health, Law and Policy, Indian Law School, Pune. So a team of mental health experts and a team of diabetes experts have trained us. We are absolutely raring to go. And we are your community here to listen to you. So going forward, I want to show you what the helpline looks like. The picture on the screen right now is a screenshot of the application, the mobile app called Blue Circle Diabetes Foundation, which is available on Android and iOS both. Once you open the app, in the background, you can see those blue circles. Those are your time and range. In the foreground, you can see something called the Buddy Project, which I've highlighted there. So for a person looking to call on the helpline, they need to open the app, go to Buddy Project, select a buddy of their choice. They can look through 12 buddies. We call them Dia buddies, and our 12 Dia buddies speak 9 different languages. So they've got a selection of people who speak different Indian languages. They can pick between whether they're more comfortable talking to a lady or a man, and they can pick a buddy of their choice, schedule a call, and talk to us. When our buddies realize that there is something that the caller is calling about and they need to see a professional, we absolutely suggest that as well, because we are volunteers who are plugging in this gap. So if we feel that the person needs to see their doctor or a mental health professional, we absolutely tell them that. Also, we have been in existence, this helpline has been in existence for 10 months. We've received over 1,000 calls, and we've had an average time per call of 41.6 minutes. So that's the amount of time. And I'm very, very grateful to our buddy team, 12 people who take out time from their busy schedules and give back to the community, because that's what this is all about. Learning yourself and then helping others just like you. So I'm showing you a screenshot now of some feedback that we've received. This is public information. It's available on the App Store. People that have used the app, and this brings me to something that I just remembered. We were doing a workshop recently with Dr. Unikrishnan, and in the workshop he mentioned that I like to empower my patients. I like to sort of put the reins of their health and their diabetes management in their hands. And I think this beautifully, the comment in the middle, it beautifully shows exactly that. So this gentleman in the middle, he lives with type 2 2 diabetes, and he brought his HbA1c down from 8.7 to 6. Of course, he was consulting his doctor, but I think there's something to be said about self-motivation. And he felt motivated when he, used the CGM and he used the app. He felt motivated to take charge of his health and bring his HbA1c down. So there are a lot of wonderful stories. I also want to show you these stories on the screen right here. There are 100 feedbacks like these that we receive, and really, really grateful for having this platform and for being able to share these thoughts with everyone at large, be it doctors and medical professionals, as well as my friends from the diabetes community. I hope all of you had a good time, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you very much for your patience, and thank you for
Thank you so much, Nupur. It was excellent talk. Hats off to you and your team. It was good to start with Ross model, and then your buddy project is absolutely amazing. And I'm sure that community will be benefited by your Blue Circle Foundation, and our team is with you in your vision and mission. So all the best for your future endeavors, and we will definitely meet again during discussion times. And now we will start with the next session by RJ Megha, and she will talk upon DIY artificial pancreas is here, clinical experiences. So over to you, RJ Megha.
Better, best. Never let it rest till the good becomes better and the better becomes best. Very appropriate for the session I'm invited to speak for, and also for the team behind this amazing virtual summit. Dr. Unnikrishnan and the team, International Diabetes Summit Season 5. Very glad to connect with all of you who have joined in right now for this session. Heartiest congratulations on the previous 4 successful summits to the teams involved. I am absolutely pleased and delighted to accept the invitation and share my experience of being a type 1 diabetic. And now, since past 3 months, I've just built in my own artificial pancreas. So very little time that I have got into the system of looping, but I'm very excited to share my experience. There's no way to fix a broken pancreas, but one can build a new one. One can almost cure a chronic condition. The very first time I got diagnosed was back in 2004. My diversity is quite ironic. It was 1st of April, the Fool's Day, back in 2004. I was in 2nd year of my college. And when I SMS'd my friends, हाँ जी उस जमाने में SMS हुआ करते थे, I think it was like, what, type 1, April Fool बना रही है क्या, all of that, Thank Lord, I was 18 when I got diagnosed, so I didn't get my parents to wake up at night several times to just check if I was alive and I was doing okay. It is not easy, condition. Those 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. and fasting and pre-lunch and post-meal and a lot of things. It was very tiring. The cure is 4-5 years away is what I heard for years. I think not just me, every type 1, starting from the day they are being diagnosed, they listen to this thinking the cure is just 4-5 years away. And it has been almost 17 years that I am type 1, and I can't see that day visible by any chance, not likely. I think a healthy pancreas is a marvel. It releases exactly the perfect amount of insulin exactly at the right time, answering those seemingly simple questions like how much carbs would a particular dish hold, or how long would the body take to absorb the same, and how much insulin would my body require, should I eat a little before working out, how much to eat before heading for sleep every day. That is one question. Traveling, There's a separate checklist that goes behind, when you are a type 1. Kitni cheezein saath mein leni padti hai, all of that. We take 100 more decisions a day than a normal person does with a healthy pancreas, trust me. Not a minute passes by when we don't think about it as a patient. Everyone would accept and agree that there is no right way to deliver just right amount of insulin until now. So now there is a little trick that we've all together got hold of, So this has been my journey from pens to pump to now being a looper. It has been a game changer for sure. The struggle to the straight line, which you can read on the screen, the struggle is real. What do I do every night? If I ask you this question, most of the people would say that, we sleep. But people with type 1, they say we struggle, because the sugar goes up and down and up and down and up and down all the time. So I faced the same problem for like 17 years until a few months back when I got myself this new friend, which I'll show you, this little thing, this little friend. It lives with me for like 24/7. I think that's a real interesting thing that has happened with me during this lockdown. Now, the main reason for which we are all here, what is artificial pancreas? The artificial pancreas is a DIY, do-it-yourself device that replaces one of the critical most part of the body. That's a pancreas. It is just about linking the insulin pump via a Riley link, which I just showed you, my friend for 24/7, and the mobile app, and tada, here I am with my own artificial pancreas. Although artificial pancreas sounds like a single appliance that you would just plug into your body, the fact is we are not yet there. There are a lot of things that comes along with that. It has taken the researchers decades to connect various diabetes devices using a combination of cables and wireless technology and creating a system that can mimic what a healthy pancreas does. And it is not easy for sure. You would agree and accept what I'm trying to say. Monitor the glucose level and deliver exactly the same amount of insulin as needed by the body. So DIY pancreas isn't a cure to type 1 diabetes, but it definitely is a sturdy bridge towards the cure. So you can avoid those complications that comes along with those zigzag graphs. Task is simple, yet it is complex. As simple as 4 words, maintain a straight line. But that doesn't come easy any which ways with any of the system. It takes a whole lot of time and dedication. Where a type 1 goes to become type none. With computing intervention, a person could maximum be in a tight range, a glycemic zone, for about, say, 40 to 50% of time. But now, with this little thing called artificial pancreas, that is called loop, it can reach nearly 70%, 80%, 90%, or even 100% time in range. In retrospect, I never ever imagined I would be walking with an entire troop. Pura kafla leke chalti hu main 24 ghante, literally, So it's me. It's my pump that's right here, which I can't really reach out up there on the screen. The camera is a little away. So, there's this pump, there's my Riley link, there's my CGM that's fitted here, if you can see here. Then there's this power bank, my chargers. But trust me, all of that is worth it when you get to see such graphs, the straight lines and those silent, peaceful sleeps in the night. Technology is absolutely a boon. And I think blessed is this generation of type 1s. So looping is unregulated, not actually authorized by the medical associations across the world. But it is not illegal as a system. So worry not. So when I said that I built my own pancreas, initially my friends were like, you built what? Preparing for a conversation about a non-commercial automated insulin delivery device, which isn't approved by the medical association, is going to be a little awkward task initially for anybody to understand technically and otherwise, So the idea can be pretty intimidating to build your own artificial pancreas online. You see, what if something goes wrong? How will I manage it? I hope it is safe. All those questions will pop up very obvious. It also popped up on my mind, But there are people from all across the world who helps every day. People who want to use it, they have to build it themselves, that is for sure. It seemed very difficult initially to me as well when I just got into the idea and I just got to know about it. So in one single line, if I have to really explain you that what Loop is all about, it is a technology that limits the chances of extreme low or extreme high blood glucose levels in your body. You may compare it with a flying plane, with a system on autopilot mode. It constantly corrects to keep the flight flying straight. So that's what a Loop does to the pancreas, to the body. How a thermostat helps to keep the room temperature under control despite of the heat outside, or it is like a cruise control. It automates the car on its own. So the healthy pancreas, whether you eat 5 pastries or a lot of pizzas, or you work out intense, it keeps the graph right, straight, rock solid, stable. And it does a remarkable job, as we all know. But a lazy pancreas, that of mine, zigzag zoom. If I had a pastry or a pizza, it's going to be chaotic. It's going to be noisy and scary for the coming few hours. So the CGM and pump cannot talk. That's where the problem is. The conjunction was missing until now. Now the issue is solved with this little thing that I have in my hand. So the conjunction which was missing until now we have the loop that makes them talk with each other, and the pump delivers the required amount of insulin every 5 minutes to keep the blood glucose level steady and stable. How does it work? That might be your question. So, it's a mathematical model which is used. There is a forecasting that happens in advance. So there's this pre-fed ISF, that is insulin sensitivity factor, which you can look at on the screen. And there is CR, that is the carb ratio. Now that depends from person to person. We have a lot of endocrinologists here as a part of this beautiful summit. Now I have to enter the carbs that I'm going to eat in advance before. Say, for example, if somebody says, Megha, here is the tea ready, you want to eat? So I just have to enter the carbs for the tea or the snack that I'm going to eat. The system computes and suggests me insulin amount my body might require to ensure a decently steady graph after I eat. Okay, so that's how this entire system works. It changes the basal rate as per the prediction. It will also microbolus if need be. So say, for example, by mistake, you've entered a wrong carb for a meal. You thought this meal will only have 10 carbs, and actually you consume 15 carbs. So those 5 extra carbs that you've consumed, it will automatically manage. This thing will automatically deliver the microboluses, little 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, which as per the need be. And also it will change the basal ratings. That's how it works. It really predicts the future. So it works 1.5 hours prior. How can you loop, in case you are interested in getting into the system? How does a loop work? So Loop has both, as you can see on the screen, hardware and software requirements. In general, to use Loop, you need to have 5 components, beginning with the very basic, that is the insulin pump. It's a priority, it has to be there. So an insulin pump, which provides continuous flow of insulin into the body via infusion set that is fit on the body, and a small cannula, which is inserted under the skin. Information here that will matter is which pumps are compatible with the system called Loop. Artificial pancreas में कौन-कौन से pumps चलते हैं, that is very important. So Medtronic 515 or 715 is what is compatible. 522 or 722. Mine is 722. Or say Medtronic 523 or 723. So these are the basically the older versions of Medtronic that work well. In fact, there are like black markets for these, it has boomed because people didn't have those older versions of the Medtronic pumps, which are hackable. And it also works with Omnipod. The Eros pods. So that is one I'm not much aware of how it works on Omnipod because I'm on to Medtronic. So I'll talk more about it. And I'm not on Dexcom. I'm on Libre Pro. So I'll also be able to focus more on that once we go ahead. The another thing which you can see on the screen is CGM, constant glucose monitoring, that takes every 5 minutes of blood sugar readings and via a little sensor worn on the skin that is right here. That has its own separate cannula from the pump. So pump is already has one cannula. Here is another one. And as far as CGMs are concerned, there's this Dexcom, Libre or Libre Pro or Guardian, whichever you are comfortable with. The third thing that is important is a transmitter. What is transmitter? So above my Libre Pro little coin kind of a thing, that is the CGM, I have this one little elongated thing which you can see popping out on my skin. Now this thing is the Meow Meow. That is a transmitter which sends the data from the CGM to the iPhone. Now iPhone is a must if you are wanting to use artificial pancreas system called Loop. Why? I'll explain you in a while. So Dexcom doesn't need a transmitter. It has a Bluetooth enabled inside within the system. But if you are on a Libre Pro like how I am on, you will need a Meow Meow 2 above the CGM. So that will help transmit your data from CGM to your iPhone. That's how it will help. Third is obviously the Riley link that makes the pump and the phone both talk. Of course, as I said, a compatible iPhone plus an Apple computer plus Xcode. That is a free Apple application that you will need. Apple developer membership. So you'll have to build a little app algorithm, the brain of the system, I would say, that crunches the numbers to predict, where the glucose levels are headed. And then it tells the pump to deliver so and so amount of insulin as per how the body is reacting to a particular meal, according to your insulin sensitivity factor, according to your carb ratio that you have pre-fed. So these are the basics, the 5 things that you require. In my experience, it is definitely a life-changing thing, and thanks to the developers for not limiting the technology just to themselves and making the tech available to all across the world. They have put in some hours and hours and hours behind building this artificial pancreas, the system, without being paid. Rather, they had the regular jobs which are on. They keep on adding a lot of new features with time, and I think it all started back in 2009. It has been almost a decade that they've developed this system. They've evolved the system with time. So if you ask me a question, how to build on my own, luckily for me, it was my husband Ritam, starting from convincing me to get onto the system, to ordering the stuff, to understanding how to build it, all of it, 1000% credit to him in my case. But my point here is that one can build it on his or her own. It is not a rocket science. The website has step-by-step guideline on how to build it, so don't worry about it. The Loop app, it is totally understandable, and it is okay to be intimidated initially and worried that how technical is it. The first question that pops up on anybody's mind is, do I need to be very tech smart, tech savvy for building a Loop? No, you don't need to be very tech savvy. Having a Apple computer or an iPhone, I think it's enough. You already have the required level of experience. Beyond that, simply read the directions slowly and diligently. All the information you have right in front of the screen on the documents that they provide, I think you should be good to go. Oftentimes it happens that the non-tech people do better than the tech people. Why? Because usually it happens that the non-tech people, they'll be so meticulous, they'll read slowly, they'll follow every damn instruction written on it, and it might happen that they'll not miss on a single sentence, while the tech-savvy people are confident that, oh, that is okay, and they just skip quickly. So it might happen that non-tech people are better than how tech people would behave with this particular system. So another question that quickly comes up on anybody's mind is, can I use an Android phone on Loop? No, this is purely on Apple, so you'll need an iPhone. I was a absolute Android advocate, but no more, because now I had to shift in this. Can I download Loop from the App Store? If that is the question, no. Loop is not available for download. You need to build your own. It works on batteries. This is a very important point. So I have to charge my Riley link every day, every single night. I have to charge this. But good news, gone are the days. The latest version comes with the same rate for which I got this. It has batteries that you just have to charge once in a month, and its name is Orange Link. You can Google about it after the session. The main important thing for which I'm here, how has my experience been with looping? You remember the far-fetched dream of a diabetic I mentioned earlier in the very first slide? That straight line, Instead of micromanaging your own blood sugar, people with diabetes can offload the work to the algorithm. What better? What more would you ask for, These systems, they don't get tired. So I wake up with a 120 every single morning. I haven't experienced that since my diagnosis. So until I started looping, in my belief, or rather in everybody's understanding, a good night's sleep is the best meditation. So instead of being in a 150% time in range, now there are days when I'm like 80, 90, 100% time in range. What more do I want? Knowing my food better. So, when it comes to food, the gray part that you can see on the screen right now, it is the predicted, and the green is the observed thing. So, it shows how much carbs is the body absorbing. So many times I go wrong, like proteins take a lot of time to absorb. So I'm supposed to, when I enter the number of carbs I'm going to eat in advance before I sit for my meal, be it breakfast, be it lunch, be it dinner, I'm supposed to enter that my breakfast is going to be, say, 15 grams. My lunch is going to be, say, 35, 40, 45 grams, whatever, how much ever you are going to eat. So what happens is pizza will take 5 hours to get absorbed. So I divide that absorption into two different slots. Say, for example, a basic meal, it will take just 2 hours to absorb. Protein based meal, if I'm eating a paneer, I'm going to enter 4 hours for absorption. If I'm going to drink a tea with sugar, I'll enter 30 minutes of absorption. So depending on what you eat, so you have to actually understand your food better, and that is going to come with time. You can't just be an expert in a day. It will come with time. It has been 3 months that I'm on to loop, and I've also started understanding with time, with trial and error. The system made me more conscious about my health, for good. It helps the patient negotiate appropriate goals of glucose targets, such as time in range, time in hypoglycemia, time in hyperglycemia, your HbA1c. All of that you'll understand better, and you will negotiate appropriate post meal and exercise range. So like how you can right now look on the screen, I have been more attentive to my body. How? So overrides, as you can read on the screen. So if I'm, say, for example, if I'm cycling, exercise mode, so I'll click on that, and it will deliver 1.5 times of insulin that I have set. Pre-fed kiya hota hai, jo basal rate, it will deliver more. So this feature allows the artificial pancreas, that is a loop system, to automatically also shut down the insulin delivery in a case I am feeling low. So if the blood sugar threshold it has reached, so this capability is the key to creating AP, the artificial pancreas, that can truly control the glucose levels. So by motivating myself to follow my own data more closely, Loop is teaching me lessons about exercise routines, or say sleep mode, or say insulin requirement, is the insulin sensitivity factor, the carb ratio, how important a low carb diet is, how portion control is important. All these things you will understand. And also, it will help to falter less when it comes to carb calculations. Importantly, it is helping me to, start stepping back from over treating when the glucose levels go low. When I dip, so initially I used to have like 1, 2, 3, 4 spoons of glucose. I used to have that when I was low, and then it will zoop rise up. But now I understand how much I need, and every time I have glucose, I also feed the carbs for that, so that my loop understands that I've already treated my hypo and I have some carbs already there. So it will not, stop or override. So all of that is very important to understand. And that, as I said, that, you will also understand the basic nitty-gritties, which are very important. I never understood that for all these 17 years, which I understand now. The standard deviation after I have my meal, it shouldn't be more than 30. So if while I had my meal, I set for my meal, I was on 110. So after my lunch, I should be maximum around 150, max to max 160, not above that. So 30-40 is a deviation I'm following as of now. People who are more under tighter control might be having 20-30 deviation maximum. So it will take time to fine tune the settings, understand your basal requirement, troubleshooting the glucose patterns, because most of the times what the problem I am facing is the spikes after my lunch, my meal, my dinner, my breakfast. So that is what I'm trying to right now conquer and understand. So as I said, I started looping in November. It has just been 3 months, and I'm still learning, and so far so good. It is getting better with time, as I showed you the graphs with the 98%, 90%, 100% time in range. So it has started becoming often. So the next thing I want to talk about is there is someone who's watching me 24/7. So my profession is with radio, with media, with print and electronic media, hosting a lot of events all the time, So say for example I am busy with my work, or say for example there's a parent who's listening to me, the kid has the exam, so the anxiety and the stress and the cortisol is right up. That is when you are assured, you feel secure that there's somebody watching me even when I am not having the time to actually look at my phone, change the settings of the insulin that I require. There's somebody as little as this doing my job. The target range I have set is 80 to 160, where it maintains your pre-programmed pump basal ratings. But if the CGM predicts that you are going to rise above 160 in the next 1 hour, it will increase your basal ratings automatically. And there is also one more feature called microbolus. So if your glucose is predicted to go above 180 due to anxiety, due to stress, whatever the reason is, or maybe you have hogged a lot of food because you are out somewhere or whatever, the next half an hour it will try to quickly automatically deliver a correction. Next, when it comes to family, it is worry free. There's this thing called Night Scout, where my profile is being uploaded. So my family can access. So this is my husband who's accessing my blood glucose level, so to say, so remotely over Night Scout. He's in his office, I am in my office, I am out somewhere in India, out of India, hosting events, traveling. He can actually access my data. So we get an alarm if the sugar is going to dip or if it rises. The threshold range that we have set, 80 to 180 or 160, however you want to set your thresholds, Loop will upload your basal schedule, your ISF, your carb ratio, the overrides that you've preset, everything on your Night Scout profile. So if you ever lose your phone and you need the backup, you need to set up the Loop brand new again, your settings will be right there saved. And interestingly, your parents, your husband, your family can actually look over you, that what is the thing like. So you are not worried, neither are they worried. More importantly, the server gets the data updated for thousands of patients, diabetics, type 1, type 2, whichever type you are, across the world on their server for free. So there are like people who donate to this particular foundation called Night Scout Foundation because they're doing an amazing job. Don't overestimate the technology. The artificial pancreas, it can go wrong. If you ask that, can it ever go wrong? The answer is absolutely yes. I am experiencing myself. The wrong carb that you fed, it will confuse the loop. Overeating is the biggest mistake that a diabetic does. Research have shown that in general, the artificial pancreas are safe and they are very effective. And, however, just like any medical technology devices, these systems aren't perfect. Out of range blood sugars can still happen. So users need to proceed with caution. In diabetes online community, you will see a lot of people writing about it, on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. They put a lot of screenshots where they've successfully managed 100% time in range, and also when they have failed. Those instances are absolutely available. The biggest glitch is that you have to be with your mobile, Bluetooth and internet on all the time. Moving ahead, the very important thing, the Loop community. The bestest part about the entire artificial pancreas is this: the thousands of people who are committed to helping each other advance technically. 24 hours there's someone on Facebook group who's there to reply you, who's awake. You will never be disappointed. All your queries are being answered. There are around, as you can see on the screen, around 26,000 members. So me and my husband would especially want to thank a looper called Anirudh Reddy from Bangalore. I think one of the very foremost people who got loop. I think across India right now there are very few people, 4, 5, 6 people who might be looping. Anirudh is one who initially did this, and I think he has been on loop for more than 1.5 years, even more. And he has been helping us all the time. We got confused that we are not on Dexcom, we are on on a system which not many people are using it across the world, because we are on a Libre Pro CGM. How to connect all of this, all the queries. He was one. So thank you, Anirudh, for all the helps that you've been giving us always. Another person I would definitely want to mention is Nupur Lalwani from the Blue Circle Diabetes Foundation. She's doing a beyond amazing job spreading the awareness consistently. There are various videos and workshops and the Buddy Project in so many languages. So the WhatsApp group that I'm on to, Rohan and Snehal, they are doing such a great job at supporting each other. That the importance of community I only understood after joining Blue Circle Diabetes Foundation. That also happened with me during lockdown. GitHub is one thing you will come across when you're trying to get onto Loop. It is the biggest example of community revolutionizing the entire field of diabetes and the treatment. The tech-savvy movement is purely open source, meaning the community is constantly co-developing the tools together. Hashtag we are not waiting. This is where it all started, the artificial pancreas thing. So this hashtag has become a rally cry amongst the citizen hackers moving ahead with medical device innovation without waiting for a go ahead from a giant pharma company or a medical association. The looping community is so tight knit that the person who actually wrote the code is some.
Thank you. And this was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful presentation by Megha. So I think the marvelous nature of this presentation is that it's coming from people who are using this technology and the do it by movement, your do it yourself movement, the we are not waiting movement. And it was just fantastic listening to DJ Megha, and we as doctors, both Dr. Veda and me, we would like to applaud that. Fantastic. And please stay, because we're going to have a discussion where people are going to ask questions, and we really enjoyed it. I think this talk for me was a highlight of the day by DJ Megha, where she discussed looping and she discussed how looping can change. And now it's time for our next speaker, who's going to talk about stem cell therapy in diabetes. And Dr. William Rust is somebody we've known for the last 5 years. In fact, I met him 5 years ago when he came to the first International Diabetes Summit of the Chalaram Diabetes Institute. And he's a researcher working, he's a head of Seraxis, and one of the most eminent stem cell researchers in the world. And his passion, you've heard, you've heard Nupur Lalwani speak, you heard DJ Megha speak, you've heard Cheryl Salis speak, and you've heard so many other people, Dr. Soumitra Pathare, speak on the importance of mental health. Now, everybody with type 1 diabetes asks, stem cell, doctor, can we go for stem cell therapy? Is it a dream? Is it a reality? Is it going to become a reality? Dr. William Rust has worked in US and Singapore and has been working towards a practical cell-based therapy for insulin-dependent diabetes. Over to you, Dr. Will Rust, for your presentation.
And thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you today. The topic of my talk will be stem cells for type 1 diabetes. And specifically, I'm going to be addressing the dichotomy between the dream, what we want to achieve, versus the reality, where the technology stands today. So to begin, I'd like to introduce my company, who I'm representing today. We are Seraxis Inc. We have developed a proprietary stem cell line that efficiently matures into pancreatic islets that form the basis of our islet regeneration therapy. We have also developed a device which we've called Seragraft that enables the function of our therapeutic cells in an immunocompetent host. And lastly, we recently announced that we raised sufficient capital from a global pharmaceutical partner and from a group of VCs to complete our preclinical studies and to launch our clinical studies. Much of that background and data I'm going to be demonstrating for you today. But first, a background on what we're trying to achieve. I'm going to demonstrate how diabetes is currently cured in the clinic. This serves as a proof of concept for islet replacement therapy derived from stem cells. So this is the way diabetes can be cured using this currently. So a pancreas is acquired through human organ donation. And then from that pancreas, the individual islets are isolated. Those harvested islets are then implanted to the liver of the diabetic patient. And the way that occurs is they are infused into the portal vein. They, from the portal vein, get trapped into the microvasculature of the liver. Many of them establish a residency there. And then they convert the liver into an organ with two functions, obviously the liver, and also a new function as the endocrine pancreas. And patients that receive this therapy can be insulin independent for 2 to 5 years. So this, this proof of concept is very strong. However, the patient receives total immune suppression as they would for any other allogeneic organ transplant. And most patients would not want that. Even though if they did, there are not enough islets available to treat the patients that are in need. So this is where stem cells fit in. Stem cells can serve as an unlimited supply of islets for transplant. And this is how that would occur. The stem cells pictured here on the left are essentially immortal cells that we can grow to any scale. When a sufficient scale is reached for a therapeutic dose, these can then be matured into the insulin secreting phenotype of the pancreatic islet. Once we have those, then these islets generated in a lab can be implanted into a device, and then the device delivers those cells into a suitable site of the human body where they can function to detect blood glucose and secrete the appropriate amount of insulin. In the picture here, I've demonstrated the omentum as the target tissue for the islet within a device. However, most of the people in this field are using a subcutaneous pocket, a pouch created under the skin as a site for the delivery of their devices. There is a lot of momentum behind this effort currently. I've listed here many pharma companies with an investment in diabetes that are focused on developing either internally or through partnership a program to develop an islet replacement therapy for insulin-dependent diabetics. So I want to focus specifically on the dream versus the reality. So the dream is this. There have been greater than 30 journal articles that describe total reversal of diabetes in rodent models following this or a very similar strategy. In addition to that, there are 2 clinical trials that are currently recruiting. And there is one clinical trial that was just recently announced and will begin in the next 6 months. So there's quite a lot of evidence that this strategy could be a successful one. The reality, however, is that there has not been no evidence of that in a relevant animal model. There's been no evidence of diabetes reversal in large animals. Regardless of the clinical studies that I've just mentioned, there still has not been any demonstrated benefit to a human patient from this therapy. So there's still quite a bit of difference between reality and dream. The question is why? There are 3 main reasons, and I'm going to address each of them here. The first one is in inadequate dose. Now that sounds obvious, but if we deliver to a patient a dose of islets that is not sufficient, then obviously there won't be clinical benefit. The next is immune rejection or fibrosis. The data suggests that any foreign device we implant into a human patient is going to stimulate a vigorous immune response that can cause failure of the device and death of the islets that are housed within the device. And then the last one is inadequate vascularization. The pancreas is a very well vascularized organ. The islets have a relatively high need for oxygen, and therefore they need to be close to a vascular supply. So the device needs to provide that. And if the device is implanted into a site with a poor vascularization, such as the skin, then there needs to be a reconstruction of some vasculature to feed that therapeutic cell population. So that is a third reason why we see failure in this strategy, and one of the issues that needs to be addressed to make the reality closer to the dream. All right, so first I'm going to address the question of dose. All right, I'm going to highlight a difference between our technology and the technology used by other groups. Other groups use embryonic stem cells or induced pluripotent stem cells in order to grow their lab-generated islets. These cell types, embryonic stem cells and iPS cells, by a genetic program to form embryos, essentially every tissue of the human body. That is their natural tendency, and that is what they will do if we implant them into the suitable environment. It is very challenging, maybe impossible, to cause those cells to mature into only a very small compartment of the pancreas. So what happens is there is a very impure population of pancreatic cells, and therefore produce dosages that are not sufficient. The Ceraxis stem cell line is different. It is not pluripotent. Rather than being defined by a genetic program to form embryos, it's incapable of that. It's defined by a genetic program to form definitive endoderm, which is the tissue layer that is the precursor to the pancreas. And because of that, we can generate more pure pancreatic populations. I'm going to give you an example of that. Here I've got an islet in the top left micrograph. This is one that we've generated in our lab from our stem cell line. It has been stained with the main islet hormones, insulin in red, glucagon in green. And that is compared to the micrograph just below it of a native islet stained the same way. And what I'm showing you here is that we have very similar distribution of the glucagon and insulin secreting cells, and it is very pure. The native islet has a necrotic core in the middle. That is an artifact of having been isolated from the pancreas. Normally that would not be there. The electron micrograph and see the structure within the cells. We can see here that the insulin containing granules within the lab generated islets from Ceraxis resemble very closely those insulin granules packed into the cytoplasm of a native islet. And if we look on the right, we can see that the actual performance of the cells, the secretion of insulin and glucagon, also is a native islet. So if you look at the top graph, one on the left is showing C-peptide secretion, the one on the right is showing glucagon secretion. And we've exposed our clusters to high and low containing glucose containing media. And then we measure the amount of insulin or glucagon secreted in response to that media. So on the left, if you look at this one, we're looking at C-peptide as a surrogate for insulin. When they are exposed to low glucose containing media, they secrete less insulin than when they are exposed to high glucose containing media, which stimulates the secretion of more insulin. The exact opposite is true with regards to the secretion of glucagon. More glucagon secreted in low glucose containing conditions and less in high glucose containing conditions. And then next, if we look at the bottom, this is measuring the influx of calcium, and this is to demonstrate that the actual mechanics of the insulin secretion are the same as a native islet. So in calcium, which is part of the pathway that causes the insulin-containing granules to fuse with the plasma membrane, that influx of calcium in response to glucose, also resembles a native islet. If we look here, this is just some more pretty pictures. What I'm showing is an assortment of our lab-generated islets, also stained with insulin and glucagon, compared again to native human islets. And what is remarkable here is that the lab-generated islets have the same random size and shape as a native islet, and the same distribution of those main islet hormones. So this is to address the question of dosage. The islets that are generated must secrete the same amount of insulin as a native islet in order to have the same effect at a clinical dose. So here we're showing that our islets generated in the lab secrete the same amount of insulin as a human islet. And we can see that if we look at the left group of bars in that graph compared to the right group, the left are the human islets exposed to low, high glucose conditions, and then finally artificially causing the secretion of insulin with exposure to potassium chloride, and the gray bar. So the Ceraxis islets are secreting the same amount of insulin in vitro as a human islet. This is in direct contrast to islets that are generated from pluripotent stem cells. There's been a handful of publications over the last year that demonstrate very clearly that they secrete only 10% the amount of insulin as a native islet. And then this is addressing the issue of purity. This is data taken from a recent publication on the bottom that's showing the purity of the islets generated from pluripotent cells. We can see here, stained for the pancreatic islet markers, that these clusters of cells are very impure. They have a very low concentration of the insulin and other hormone-producing cells. Quantification of that shows it to be at about 30%, compared to ours, which are nearly pure endocrine pancreatic cells, which you can see on the right. And then in terms of insulin secretion, islets don't just secrete insulin in a bolus. There's actually a very sophisticated insulin secretion mechanism that enables the islet to very finely tune the amount of glucose in our blood in response to eating a meal, exercise, and other factors. And what I'm showing you here is that if we look a very granular look at the actual insulin secretion of our islets, it mimics very closely that of a native islet. So if they look at this graph at the bottom, the light green is low glucose conditions, the dark green is high glucose conditions. Starting at around time point 42, we see these lab-grown islets mimicking the secretion of insulin in response to low and high glucose, exactly like a human islet. To demonstrate that, I'm going to overlay how a human islet behaves under the same circumstances. And we can see here a very similar secretion pattern over time of a human native islet compared to the lab-grown islets. So for these islets, we should be able to generate a potency and a dosage equivalent to native human islets. So when we actually implant these into animal models, in this case, we're implanting these into immuno-incompetent rodents, we're actually able to reconstruct a human pancreas. So what I'm showing you here are pictures of the fat pad of a mouse that had received the human lab-grown islets from the Ceraxis labs. These are stained again with C-peptide and glucagon, and we can see these residing within the animal tissue, and actually resembling very, very closely a cross-section of a human pancreas. So one of the reasons we think this is important is that the islets are able to function as the individual microorgans that they are in the actual pancreas. All right, when we do this in a device, we also keep them separated the way they would be separated in a native pancreas. In this case, we're putting them into a soft hydrogel that's made out of alginate and other components. And in this hydrogel, they're distributed in a very similar way as they were in the image I showed you before of the reconstructed pancreas from the fat pad. Only now they are immune protected due to the barrier of the polymer hydrogel. We have designed a device that is in a strand shape that you can see here, and that is to achieve the optimal surface to volume ratio to provide the islets that are entrapped within adequate exposure to oxygen and other nutrients to survive and to function. And then when we have a combination of our islets with a high potency at an appropriate dose and put those into animals within our device, we are able to cure those animals long-term of chemically induced diabetes. So this is the way that's done. This graph is showing the amount of insulin in the blood of the animals. So before implant, we induce diabetes by applying a drug that kills the native islets. The animals become quickly very hyperglycemic. We then implant our device containing the islets to the omental tissue of the abdomen. And within a few weeks after that implant, the blood glucose of those animals has reduced to normal levels. Normal levels is demonstrated by that red box. And then over time, it stabilizes until we get a very stable reversal of diabetes and control blood glucose in those animals. So the question now before us is what must happen in order to take the dream, which I'm presenting now, into the reality, which is that we have not yet achieved clinical benefit or benefit in the relevant animal model. This is what we think. Number one, we have to transplant a dose of islets that equal native islets in potency. It sounds obvious. Anytime we talk about treatment with a drug, we want that drug to be potent, and the same is true here. The issue is that using the pluripotent derived cells, rodents can be cured, but the dose given to those animals is 20 to 50 times higher than a clinically determined curative human dose by weight. And that's because of the low secretion of insulin and the low purity of those clusters. It is simply not possible to deliver enough cells at that low potency to provide a dose that has clinical benefit. So that's the first issue. The next thing that must occur is the regeneration of an extrapancreatic pancreas. In our opinions, the form and the function of the pancreas are very closely related. We cannot stuff the islets, which normally operate independently and have very complex mechanisms of communication with each other and with other systems of the body, into a single large space within a hard plastic device under the skin. That does not at all mimic the form of the pancreas, and so we think that would impact the function of those cells. We think that the only way to succeed is to actually reconstruct a soft tissue organ that resembles the pancreas. It has to resemble the pancreas in size and physical strength and vascularization to enable those individual islets to function as they would in a native pancreas. We also, in that construct, need to maintain the appropriate islet size and shape and separation within that organ so that the communication required for the fine-tuned maintenance of blood glucose is possible. And then lastly, we have to demonstrate efficacy in a relevant animal model. We think that is very important in preparation for the clinic if we intend to demonstrate benefit to a human patient. In our opinions and experience, rodent diabetes is very dissimilar to human diabetes. Their requirement for insulin is very different. Their metabolism is very different, and their ability to regenerate their own tissues is very different. And so that is the third very critical element in order to make the dream of the islet replacement therapy match up with the reality of where we stand today. All right, so with that, I would like to say thank you. I feel I've used up all of my time, and I will stop. And thank you for listening, and be available for questioning.
Thank you, Dr. Will Rust, and it's a pleasure, listening to you. And we are blessed to have this event because we have doctors, endocrinologists, researchers, people with type 1 diabetes, all joining in to make this a really unique setting. And let me also start by inviting one of our moderators, Dr. Saurav Dembla, to give his comments as a moderator. Dr. Saurav Dembla, would you like to come in and speak on this occasion? We are very privileged to have you here.
Thank you, doctor, for having me. I really enjoyed the session. All the sessions were very good. But the one session which I liked in particular was by RJ Megha. I've myself been, interested in looping, and I've been trying to, consolidate it, and I've been trying to do that myself. But then I was a little preoccupied with my own projects, so I was not able to do that. But it's very encouraging that looping is now catching up in India. I would like to do that myself someday. All the very best to all the potential loopers and all the audience and all the people in audience who are interested in doing it.
Yes, and we are with you as doctors because we want the best outcomes for our patients. We want our best outcomes for the patients. At the end of the day, we want you to be happy. We want you to be healthy, and whatever it takes, we are with you. So this was a unique symposium because we had diet in type 1 diabetes by Cheryl Salis. Then we talked about mental health and type 1 diabetes by Dr. Soumitra Pathare. Went on to Dr. With Nupur Lalwani's tips on type 1 diabetes management. And then we had fascinating do-it-yourself artificial pancreas presentation by RJ Megha, followed by the stem cell. What every type 1 diabetes person who comes to me with a diagnosis, the first question they ask is, shall we try stem cell? Shall we try stem cell therapy? The answer is no, because it's not there yet. It's still a dream, and science is on the way to reality, but stem cell therapy is a dream and not approved by the regulators as of now. May I ask Cheryl Salis to come in, and one of the most eminent nutritionists of India, come in and give her views on type 1 diabetes management?
I think today, with the newer kinds of insulin and so much of technology and the peer support, I think these groups really motivate and help the newly diagnosed parents. I liked when Nupur said, because we go through this day in and day out, when our child is diagnosed, and it's always like, why my child and why me? But today we tell them that it is possible, and we give them examples of Nupur and everybody else who's doing phenomenally well with the condition. And I think even with diet, and like we say, a type 1 diet is very different to a person with type 2 diabetes, and there's no deprivation. We allow children to eat everything and enjoy their parties and socialize, and with the newer insulins that have come in, it's very, very easy for these kids to adapt to that. And I think the principles apply to everybody. Healthy eating should be a part of every child's life. And today we're seeing a lot of children with type 2 diabetes and obesity. And therefore, it's very important that we tell parents that, if the child has a sibling, the other child also should eat the same food, because he's also prone to obesity and type 2 diabetes. And like I showed, I think with simple modifications, our Indian diet is very, very good and suitable for children. They don't have to buy exotic food and, things like that. Very simple homemade recipes are good enough. I think eat less out of packets. That's what I tell all parents, that, avoid anything out of packets as much as possible, especially the biscuits and a lot of things, because they're very high on carbs and saturated fat. But otherwise, our home cooked meals are good enough for our children, and they do phenomenally well. I think they're gifted.
Thank you. And Nupur's A1C, if I remember right, was 4.3. Nupur, tips for successful type 1 diabetes management from you.
Thank you, Dr. Unikrishnan, for having us here today. And it's a struggle. Every day is different. And, today as we speak, my blood sugar is 94. And I'm really grateful to technology and to the amazing, support we have from our healthcare team. Yes, you're right. I do try and maintain my A1Cs in the 5s. And it's been 25 years with T1. And I just want to let everyone know who's watching, especially parents of young kids with type 1, you'll get there, things will get better. And I think the quest to learn should never end. So I'm very thankful to you and your team.
Thank you. And Megha, your presentation was extremely enthusiastically infectious. Both Veda and me, wanted to, wanted to cheer you. And, please tell us, you've been using artificial pancreas, do it yourself, looping, and using Night Scouts. So that's a dream come true for all the type 1 diabetes people interested in technology. Your views, Megha.
As I initially said in my presentation, it's an absolute pleasure considering I never came out publicly discussing my health ever. So I think I'll be very honest, it's because of Blue Circle Diabetes Foundation. I got so comfortable talking about it openly. This is the second time I'm coming on a public forum discussing it. And I think as far as the experience with looping is concerned, the Night Scout is the bestest thing that has ever happened, because mom is one very, very concerned parent out of the two. So whenever I'm on stage and the kind of work that I'm into, I'm most of the times, for 4, 5, 6 hours into work, and I might not realize the show is on, and you just don't actually monitor things. So now my husband and my mom, they are mostly so relaxed, because I think the graph is automatically maintained most of the times, unless I overeat. Of course, as I said, that it can go wrong, but Night Scout is one amazing thing that the community is contributing for free. The server has so much of data, and as I said, a lot of people are actually contributing and donating to the foundation because they are doing a great job. And in conclusion, the best part about getting onto artificial pancreas is that it is the most chilled out part when there's no scary surgery involved. It's a wearable artificial pancreas. So right now while talking, I can just hang in my finger. So I don't, so most of the times, when it comes to anything which is about surgery, it really scares you. But here I think this innovation gives wings to my thought process. Aaj, if we have artificial pancreas, tomorrow we might, also be blessed with artificial kidneys coming up for humans, So yeah.
Thank you for that, and thank you for that. And just to
Thank you for
highlight
having
that,
me.
thank you. It's a pleasure. Just to
Thank
highlight
you.
that this session is not, sponsored by any industry or any pharmaceutical company producing any product, and this is absolutely transparent, honest session about type 1 diabetes management. So we are not promoting any product in this presentation. We've just having genuine people with type 1 diabetes, physicians taking care of them, scientists. And is Dr. Soumitra Pathare there to say a few words? Because he talked about mental health very well. While we are waiting for Dr. Pathare, but here, Dr. Will Rust. Now, you've been working on stem cell for so many years. I met you 4 years back at the Chalaram Diabetes Institute's meeting, and you must be hearing people talking, all these people with type 1 diabetes talking about it. Now, your views on dream versus reality of stem cell therapy, Dr. Rust.
So it's very heartwarming to hear all the stories about the improvements in type 1 diabetes management at this conference. We applaud all of your work. We think it's very impressive and very important what you're doing. It's a pleasure to be able to participate also in this conference. I know that our approach is a little bit different than what has been presented here, but nonetheless, we think that it is equally important, especially for parents of young children who have difficulty dealing with the changes in their lives and dealing with the difficulty of managing blood glucose. We think that a natural method of doing this with an islet replacement therapy could be the solution that many diabetics are looking for.
Thank you, Dr. William Rust. And I hope one day artificial pancreas, the true artificial pancreas, the stem cell, any of these technologies which can make life better for type 1 diabetes, will be available. We are doing a virtual run tomorrow, so there's still time to register. We've got nearly 900 registrations for the type 1 diabetes run for diabetes event, which is being held virtually because of the need for the social distancing during the pandemic. So it's a virtual event. We welcome you to visit the website of the Blue Circle Diabetes Foundation, as well as the Chalaram Diabetes Institute Facebook page, and please join. On that note, I just want to add that type 1 diabetes, is an opportunity to lead a healthy life, because if you control your blood glucose levels, if you control your blood pressure, if your sugars are normal, you are going to lead a fantastic life. And that only requires all the things we had in this meeting. Future science and technology, of course, but nutrition, managing your stress, taking your medicines, insulin on time if you have type 1 diabetes, and monitoring your glucose levels, and making sure that whatever happens, you remain happy and healthy. So it was a real pleasure. I thank the Blue Circle Diabetes Foundation for partnering with us, my colleague, Dr. Vedavati Purandare at the Chalaram Diabetes Institute, and we'll go on to the next scientific session of our conference.